John Howard Carpenter is an American filmmaker, screenwriter, and composer. Although Carpenter has worked with various movie genres, he is associated most commonly with horror, action, and science fiction films of the 1970s and 1980s.
Most films of Carpenter's career were initially commercial and critical failures, with the notable exceptions of Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, and Starman. However, many of Carpenter's films from the 1970s and the 1980s have come to be considered as cult classics, and he has been acknowledged as an influential filmmaker. The cult classics that Carpenter has directed include Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13, The Thing, Christine, Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, They Live, and In the Mouth of Madness. He returned to the Halloween franchise as both composer and executive producer for the horror sequel Halloween.
Carpenter composed or co-composed most of his film's music. He won a Saturn Award for Best Music for the film Vampires. Carpenter has released 3 studio albums, titled Lost Themes 2, an anthology, Movie Themes 1974 to 1998.
Carpenter was born on January 16, 1948 in Carthage, New York, the son of Milton Jean and Howard Ralph Carpenter, a music professor. He and his family relocated to Bowling Green, Kentucky during 1953. He was interested in films from an early age, particularly the westerns of Howard Hawks and John Ford, as well as 1950s low-budget horror films such as The Thing from Another World and high-budget science fiction like Forbidden Planet, and began filming horror short films with 8mm film even before starting high school. He attended Western Kentucky University, where his father chaired the music department, then transferred to the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts during 1968, but quit to make his first feature film.
In a beginning film course at USC Cinema during 1969, Carpenter wrote and directed an 8-minute short film, Captain Voyeur. The film was rediscovered in the USC archives in 2011 and proved interesting because it revealed elements that would appear in his later film, Halloween.
The next year he collaborated with producer John Longenecker as co-writer, film editor, and music composer for The Resurrection of Broncho Billy, which won an Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Film. The short film was enlarged to 35mm, 60 prints were made, and the film was released theatrically by Universal Studios for 2 years in the United States and Canada.
Carpenter's first major film as director, Dark Star, was a science fiction comedy that he co-wrote with Dan O'Bannon. The film reportedly cost only $60,000 and was difficult to make as both Carpenter and O'Bannon completed the film by multitasking, with Carpenter doing the musical score as well as the writing, producing, and directing, while O'Bannon acted in the film and did the special effects. Carpenter received praise for his ability to make low-budget films.
Carpenter's next film was Assault on Precinct 13, a low-budget thriller influenced by the films of Howard Hawks, particularly Rio Bravo. As with Dark Star, Carpenter was responsible for many aspects of the film's creation. He not only wrote, directed, and scored it, but also edited the film using the pseudonym John T. Chance. Carpenter has said that he considers Assault on Precinct 13 to have been his first real film because it was the first film that he filmed on a schedule. The film was the first time Carpenter worked with Deborah Hill, who played prominently in the making of some of Carpenter's most important films.
Carpenter assembled a main cast that consisted of experienced but relatively obscure actors. The 2 main actors were Austin Stoker, who had appeared previously in science fiction, disaster, and blaxploitation films, and Darwin Jostin, who had worked primarily for television and had once been Carpenter's next-door neighbor.
The film received a critical reassessment in the United States, where it is now generally regarded as one of the best exploitation films of the 1970s.
Carpenter both wrote and directed the Lauren Hutton thriller Someone's Watching Me. This television film is the tale of a single, working woman who, soon after arriving in LA, discovers that she is being stalked.
Eyes of Laura Mars, a 1978 thriller featuring Faye Dunaway and Tommy Lee Jones and directed by Irvin Kershner, was adapted from a spec script titled Eyes, written by Carpenter, and would become Carpenter's first major studio film of his career.
Halloween was a commercial success and helped develop the slasher genre. Originally an idea suggested by producer Irwin Yablans, who thought of a film about babysitters being menaced by a stalker, Carpenter took the idea and another suggestion from Yablans that it occurred during Halloween and developed a story. Carpenter said of the basic concept, "Halloween night. It has never been the theme in a film. My idea was to do an old haunted house film." The film was written by Carpenter and Deborah Hill, with Carpenter admitting that the music was inspired by both Dario Argento's Suspiria and William Friedkin's The Exorcist.
Carpenter again worked with a relatively small budget, $300,000. The film grossed more than $65 million initially, making it one of the most successful independent films of all time.
Carpenter has described Halloween as true crass exploitation. "I decided to make a film I would love to have seen as a kid, full of cheap tricks like a haunted house at a fair where you walk down the corridor and things jump out at you." The film has often been cited as an allegory on the virtue of sexual purity and the danger of casual sex. Although Carpenter has explained that this was not his intent, it has been suggested that I was making some kind of moral statement. Believe me, I'm not. In Halloween, I viewed the characters as simply normal teenagers.
In addition to the film's critical and commercial success, Carpenter's self-composed Halloween theme became recognizable apart from the film.
During 1979, Carpenter began what was to be the first of several collaborations with actor Kurt Russell when he directed the television film Elvis.
Carpenter followed up the success of Halloween with The Fog, a ghostly revenge tale inspired by horror comics such as Tales from the Crypt and By the Crawling Eye, a 1958 film about monsters hiding in clouds.
Completing The Fog was an unusually difficult process for Carpenter. After viewing a rough cut of the film, he was dissatisfied with the result. For the only time in his filmmaking career, he had to devise a way to salvage a nearly finished film that did not meet his standards. In order to make the film more coherent and frightening, Carpenter filmed additional footage that included a number of new scenes.
Despite production problems and mostly negative critical reception, The Fog was another commercial success for Carpenter. The film was made on a budget of $1,000,000, but it grossed over $21,000,000 in the United States alone. Carpenter has said that The Fog is not his favorite film, although he considers it a minor horror classic.
Carpenter immediately followed The Fog with the science fiction adventure Escape from New York. Featuring several actors that Carpenter had collaborated with or would collaborate with again, as well as several notable actors, it became both commercially successful and critically acclaimed.
His next film, The Thing, is notable for its high production values, including innovative special effects by Rob Bottin, special visual effects by matte artist Albert Whitlock, a score by Ennio Morricone, and a cast including young actor Kurt Russell and respected character actors such as Wilford Brimley, Richard Dysart, Charles Hallahan, Keith David, and Richard Major. The Thing was distributed by Universal Pictures.
Although Carpenter's film used the same source material as the 1951 Howard Hawks film, The Thing from Another World, it is more faithful to the John W. Campbell, Jr. novella, Who Goes There?, upon which both films were based. Moreover, unlike the Hawks film, The Thing was part of what Carpenter later called his Apocalypse trilogy, a trio of films with bleak endings for the film's characters. Being a graphic, sinister horror film, it did not appeal to audiences during the summer of 1982, especially when E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which presented a much more lighthearted and family-friendly depiction of alien visitation, was released 2 weeks prior. In an interview, Carpenter stated that E.T.'s release could have been largely responsible for the film's disappointment. As The Thing did not perform well commercially, it was Carpenter's first financial disappointment.
During filming of The Thing, Universal offered him the chance to direct Firestarter, based on the novel by Stephen King. Carpenter hired Bill Lancaster and Bill Phillips respectively to adapt the novel into different versions of the screenplay. Carpenter had intended Richard Dreyfuss as Andy McGee, but when The Thing was a financial disappointment, Universal replaced Carpenter with Mark L. Lester. Carpenter's next film, Christine, was the 1983 adaptation of the Stephen King novel of the same name. The story concerns a high school nerd named Arnie Cunningham who buys a junked 1958 Plymouth Fury which turns out to have supernatural powers. As Cunningham restores and rebuilds the car, he becomes unnaturally obsessed with it, with deadly consequences. Christine did respectable business upon its release and was received well by critics. However, Carpenter has been quoted as saying he directed the film because it was the only thing offered to him at the time.
Starman was produced by Michael Douglas. The script was well received by Columbia Pictures, which chose it in preference to the script for E.T., and prompted Steven Spielberg to go to Universal Pictures. Douglas chose Carpenter to be the director because of his reputation as an action director who could also convey strong emotion. Starman was reviewed favorably by the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, and LA Weekly, and described by Carpenter as a film he envisioned as a romantic comedy similar to It Happened One Night Only with a Space Alien. The film received Oscar and Golden Globe nominations for Jeff Bridges' portrayal of Starman in